Thanks for joining us in what is a busy marking period. In a change to normal operations, Rachel is not speaking first, and the reasons why that is because she's going to be our honoured guest today. So I think most people have seen me before, but I did notice one new name on the list. So my name's Ian Turner. I'm from the University of Derby, along with Leisha Nichols-Drew from De Montfort and Rachel Bolton-King from Staffordshire. We set up a remote forensics CSI, which seems like eons ago. And we're now coming close to the end of our second season of talks. So we've got one more after this event. So the idea is very simple. We'll have a talk on an area of forensic practice. And following that talk, we'll have a open and often enlightening discussion probing the areas that presenters delivered on. It's an opening, welcoming community. We welcome questions. You can drop these in the chat as we go through, or if you'd prefer, wait until the end and switch your cameras on and we can have a bit of a dialogue. So we're going to start in a minute. So I'll ask you just to switch off your videos just whilst we undertake the presentation, just to save the bandwidth, if that's okay. So it's my pleasure to introduce, which seems very strange because Rachel organised the meeting, Rachel Bolton-King. So Rachel's been very prolific recently in terms of publications related to pedagogy, and I'm really interested in hearing about her work today. It's all to do with an in-person and remote mentoring scheme that she set up at Staffordshire University. I think we all recognise the challenges that our students face, particularly transitioning through and then entering the world of work at university. And Rachel and colleagues have set up a kind of novel approach at her institution, which they've evaluated, and she's going to share with us today. So Rachel, over to you. Looking forward to hearing your talk.
Thanks very much, Ian. Yes, apologies to everybody for it being me continuing to talk. But I really welcome everybody today, and it's great to see both practitioners and academics joining. And so hopefully I'm going to, whilst my informal mentoring that I'm going to talk about was very much in an academic setting, I'm going to try and pitch this in a manner that hopefully is going to appeal and relate to both parties. So in terms of the latest paper that I've written up, the mentoring scheme that I established actually was about 10 years, nearly 10 years ago now at Staffordshire, was primarily to give my senior learners, so anyone other than first year students at undergraduate level, the opportunity to do something extracurricular that was subject specific, and not only was good to hopefully add to their CV, but also gave them an opportunity to go outside of the curriculum and develop skills that they perhaps may be getting in their jobs, their transferable skills, but they may not be very easy to identify as being skills that were subject specific. So I noticed when I first went into academia that students and also those early in their careers in the job market really found it quite hard to identify their real life examples and be able to relate those to the specific the specific skills or competencies that employers wanted. And likewise, HR and employers found it difficult to extract the key skills and competencies out of the applications that new graduates, particularly, or those entering the forensic sector, were finding it difficult to articulate. And so I set up this mentoring scheme as an opportunity for also for students and those within the community to network with each other, to get to know each other, and primarily to then help those first year undergraduate students transition into the university. But again, within the employment sector, this could be, to enable new recruits, or those transitioning between different sectors or different departments within an organisation, to help them fit in, to help them settle, to help them meet new people, but also to gain that perspective of what it was like and what it's been like to work or to be within a particular organisation for a period of time. So the paper that I've just published is very much focusing on the benefits to mentors, because there's a lot of literature that focuses on the benefits of mentoring to mentees, both in the employment sector and in the education sector. I wanted to actually really consider and explore how the mentors themselves felt that participating in such a scheme actually benefited them. And likewise, again, there was a slightly more literature from those that are in the employment sector rather than in the education sector. So there was a bit of a gap, I felt. And I also felt that there was a gap and a need for a suggestive framework to help both employers as well as career advisors, as well as students and academics, to help to identify examples of where they may have had real life experiences, and to help them extract what those key skills may be, whether their universities term them graduate attributes, or whether they are specific skills and competencies that employers are looking for. So what I wanted to do today really was to really think about and support you in seeing whether you already do mentoring schemes within your organisation, or if not, whether you may consider doing that. So the first thing I wanted to ask you, and if it would be great if you could use the hands up feature in Teams so that I can just see a quick poll around how many people in the audience already have some form of mentoring scheme. So this could be a mentoring scheme for their students first and foremost. Let's see if there are any hands up for anyone who have mentoring schemes for their students. Okay, so only one person, so that's really good. How about mentoring schemes for staff? So you could be an academic or a trainer or a practitioner. Okay, great. So a much greater proportion of you from a professional development perspective seem to have mentoring as part of maybe your own CPD or that of your peers. So thank you for that. That's brilliant. So if you want to, while I'm having a chat with you about my particular scheme and the life cycle and my thoughts for what you may want to do, if you were willing or wanted to set up such a mentoring scheme, can you just have a quick write into the chat about what that particular mentoring scheme that you either do as professionals or as with your students, what opportunities there are, just so you've got that opportunity to share with each other, but also with me as well. That would be fantastic. And thanks, Ian, for popping that link in the chat there as well. So I'll just give you a short minute to think before I start. Great. So some have informal mentoring, particularly for new staff. That's brilliant. In terms of their progression, in terms of their career development, that's fantastic. Oh yeah, absolutely. To support researchers and those new in the role, new starters. And external mentoring as well. That's fantastic. So mentoring between different organisations, that's brilliant. Yeah, as well, staff that are assigned to students to support them as mentors, absolutely. Whether they're also pastoral support or academic support. Fantastic. Great, okay. Well, thinking about that, as you can see, there are loads of different types of mentoring opportunity. And I apologise that this is really, really small. I'm not going to talk through all of this. This is, and as always, we'll share the slides and I'll share a PDF of these slides for you so that you can go through them in your own time and you can sort of pick up on these thoughts, etc. But in terms of the life cycle and the considerations for setting up, and I would say any mentoring programme, you've got some key decisions that you really want to take on board, and some of those key stages of that process and the scheme are obviously your standard ones around planning, recruiting for mentors, training those mentors, whether that's an informal training or more formalized training. There's also that opportunity to test out whether things work, whether the plan is, particularly in that first time that you do it, the first time you run it, but also that implementation stage, and then gaining that really important feedback from everybody, all those stakeholders that were involved, in order to help improve, to understand what works, and to evaluate the scheme, and actually not only about its improvement, but is it even worth continuing to do? Because, as with anything, setting up a new scheme isn't going to just be a really quick, simple thing to do. But really, luckily, we've got a whole heap of different people with different experiences of mentoring, as you've seen in the chat, that would enable you to reach out and get some external informal mentoring and support in order to set these up. And I am absolutely happy to have a chat individually or with groups with anybody who would be interested in doing this with either their students or staff within their organisations. I think for me, in terms of the key things that I needed to consider when setting up my mentoring programme, is actually who the mentees were going to be, what the benefit was to them, and who and how many mentors I thought I might be able to recruit. So for this particular module that I have mentoring in, I had initially 200 first year students on this module. So it was a core module, and I had numerous different workshops basically where the mentors would come in and support. And I'll show you some pictures very shortly. But I had that big decision from the literature to make. Do I do this formally? Do I do it informally? Do I allocate specific mentors to mentees, or do I get them to self-select? I also had, how many mentors do I have per group of mentees? And so I ran this for a good few years in person, and then the pandemic hit. And I thought, oh gosh, how am I going to do this remotely? Because there was no way that I was going to stop the mentoring scheme. I wanted to make sure that students still had this opportunity. And so for me, one of the most interesting parts actually has been, how do I turn an in-person mentoring scheme into a remote mentoring scheme? And actually, I think this is fundamentally where some of the biggest skills that the mentors developed was actually getting involved with a greater opportunity to help me produce and test the mechanisms of how we were going to deliver what used to be in-person workshops, where they kind of just read my teaching plan. They had some suggested answers to go through so that they could prepare. Then they just came into the room and interacted with the mentees really quite easily. there didn't need to be an awful lot of planning from the mentor's perspective. In a comparison during the pandemic, those mentors were not only instrumental to me, but they were instrumental to the students, and they've really been able to develop some key competencies that they may not have been able to develop during their normal curriculum or even our in-person activities. And so this was around, evaluating and testing different platforms. So Teams, we had Top Hat, there was also Zoom. They had to use their mobile devices, their tablets, their laptops, sometimes in combination with each other in order to interact with the mentees. We had to test all of these platforms out. We had to redesign our initial activities so that this could be achieved and the mentees still achieved their learning outcomes. And so some of the ways that we actually did this were, so on the screen, I've just got some tweets that the students and myself have shared over the years. And, we've gone from doing in-person dressing up, assessing contamination issues by considering the order of clothing in which we might get dressed in our PPE. That had to be turned into an at-home activity. And so we developed and we sent out kits to the students, and we got them to turn on their microphones. So the mentees themselves got a little bit more involved and developed their digital skills a little bit more, because we know how much people love to keep their cameras and their microphones off, and they get very self-conscious in these particular situations. So that was a really great opportunity. And then they shared some of their images via Twitter and social media, but also through our communications platforms as well. The one that I found and the mentors found was the most exciting was our crime scene activity. And actually, so what we normally would have done is in person, the students would have come in, the mentors and I would have set up all of our mock crime scenes. The students would have come in, they would have seen the scenes, they would have been observing, making interpretations, discussing it, and then conducting a search of the scene. And in fact, what we did was actually the mentors then were the ones to set up their crime scenes. They did that in their own home or their own space. They had their flatmates or their family members involved. So we had live bodies, we had mock evidence, drugs, paraphernalia set up. You name it, we had mock blood. The students were able to get so creative about what scenes they produced and how they produced it. And then they live streamed from their apartments or their space to all the students. They interacted verbally and using their cameras, and the mentees interacted in the same way. So they were still able to observe. They instructed the mentors how to search the scene. And then when they came back onto campus, they were then able to be more comfortable and confident in actually what those mechanisms were. And so actually, this was a fantastic opportunity for all of the students, whether they were mentors or mentees, to develop skills that actually, and we've been incorporating into our new delivery since the pandemic as well. More as additional activities rather than sort of compulsory in-class ones. So just to give you an idea, within the paper, I've documented, this is just one of the example activities about trying to tease out and list all of the activities that the mentors actually developed by conducting and being a mentor on this particular workshop, so the attending the crime scene workshop. And then I've tried to identify what the graduate attributes might be. So when universities list these things, these attributes that all their graduates, they believe or they hope that they have. So if you're an employer and you're employing graduates, then hopefully if you see some of these terms, you might be able to align where these particular examples may have come from as well. And then some of the specific skills that may have been termed from the literature sources as well. So you can see there's a whole range of different skills that the mentors themselves have done, and what I hoped their learning objectives would be. There's also another example within the paper that's focused on sampling and packaging of evidence. And so, and rather than repeating lots of the same skills, I've tried to pick out the ones that were new and specific to that particular workshop scenario. Likewise, I then tried to map those graduate attributes and the skills of the mentors to the specific competencies and skills that are outlined by the Chartered Society of Forensic Sciences and also the College of Policing, to again just try and help particularly students, but also careers advisors and academics, how we can better support our students in being able to identify how their real life examples and the activities that they've conducted might actually translate into their application forms, so that hopefully then the employers are able to, particularly HR, if they aren't subject experts, maybe and hopefully able to pick out those points, those desired and essential skills a little bit more easily. So I'd always appreciate feedback from anybody on what I've incorporated into the paper. But in terms of how and the success of this, I mean, obviously, the point of my evaluation was I did it with the mentees as well as the mentors, and the mentees, if they didn't say that having those mentors in the classroom was beneficial to them, and if the mentors again didn't say that they'd developed any skills, which are all outlined in the paper, so I won't go through those, but I'd have stopped. You know, if there wasn't any perceived benefit to the mentees and the mentors, then what would have been the point in me conducting this? But when I asked the mentees whether they felt that any other subjects or modules or areas of their development would have been helpful to have, they did suggest that particularly in the scientific modules, the more complex modules, this is where so for example, in the maths or the chemistry focus modules in the first year, we again implemented the same mentoring approach, so informal mentoring, but in a structured fashion into those additional first year modules. We've also done it at in the project module. So we have fourth year MSci students, so they've already done their third year research project. And so the MSci students mentor the level 6 students. And likewise, the level 6 students have also supported the level 5 students in other modules as well. And so this, the tweet as an example, was one of the individuals, in this case for the maths, we knew that people's confidence in maths was really low. And so we didn't think that students would be as willing to voluntarily say that they would want to become mentors. So in this case, actually, I set up a score. You know, if you got in the class assessment over 70%, you were identified as being a mentor to then help peers in the same year group, so in the same class, to actually help them. So it didn't have to be mentoring from level, like higher level students or more experienced students. Actually, the mentoring opportunity could be just as valuable with your new recruits. So if you know that someone's got lots of experience in one particular area that they feel that they could support another new recruit with, that same level mentoring is just as valuable. And again, not just with new recruits, but anybody at the same level within their organisation, having that mentoring opportunity informally, without lots of paperwork and burden, you know, to complete forms, etc., you know, can be a really, really powerful thing, and actually empowering for both the mentor and the mentee to help them to, they've got some training, some basis on which to work, but then they can expand on that. We also took it out of the campus, and we took the mentoring opportunity actually into Alton Towers, and so we expanded the environment in which we did this as well. So I mean, the key benefits to me and you know, everyone that's part of the scheme has been really, really good. You know, all of the time and effort that I've put into it, you know, is absolutely worthwhile from my perspective, and I would really encourage anybody else who wants to start or develop and expand any of their mentoring opportunities to do so. It's a really great experience, but also it's really good to see the outcomes for both parties. So in particular, it was an extracurricular skills development of the mentors that I really saw. It helped all of the students, all of the people involved in the scheme, including myself, to network with each other. You know, I had better communication and a building of a relationship with the mentors as well as the mentees. And the mentees saw the way I was and the relationship I had with the mentors as something that they wanted to aspire to, and was a reason that they became a mentor the following year when given the opportunity. The students, particularly the new students, really felt it helped them transition through their student journey, and likewise they could then support those that were new to the organisation when they came in. It enabled me to write better references, and some really great references for my my mentors when they came to leave university. It made me truly proud, and I often cried every year. I mean, that's pretty standard anyway for me. I get a bit emotional at this times of year. But, you know, also personally, it made my teaching so much more interactive and engaging and fun. And as a real benefit, it was also more efficient. So my workshops each had 50 students in a workshop, and so having, you know, a small handful of mentors to help me to give those mentees that little bit more group-based work, that little bit more support in such a large group was, you know, really beneficial as well. So in terms of the mentoring schemes, you know, there's a whole range of different approaches that you can take and you can use. And from my perspective, what matters is that you choose an approach that's right for you as the lead, and you choose an approach that's right for your mentees and your mentors, and what you hope that they will benefit and gain from being part of a scheme, whether it's formal or informal. So my first question was if you would be willing to set up your own or develop or enhance your own mentoring scheme. Do you think that your trainees or your new recruits or your learners would value this opportunity, this scheme to be established, either as a mentor or as a mentee? So if you use your raise hand function again, so I can see. Okay, so a couple of people feel that, oh, great. I must have had a little bit of a delay, I'm sure. That's great. Fantastic. So quite a few people thinking that that either the learners, the trainees, the mentors, the mentees would find this beneficial. Brilliant. So again, in the chat, if you think that this is beneficial, could you write what department or course or what type of mentoring that you think you would want to set up? Is it for a particular employer, like a particular role? Is it for a particular module or course? What would you start with? Or what competency would you be focusing on? Great point, Tim. And if I don't come back to you on this as a question, to do ask it again, because I've got some thoughts on my experiences with that. Yeah, definitely, Leisha. The maths and the chemistry side was really beneficial. But that one was a lot harder to sustain, and partly because of exactly what Tim was saying and what I mentioned earlier about, you know, people's confidence and willingness, therefore, to volunteer if it wasn't sort of a mandatory thing. Yeah, no problem, Matt, don't worry. Yeah, so timetabling can be problematic. Yeah, just while everyone's typing in as well, I'll comment on Tim's point around engagement. And so this is one of the reasons why I suggest, or I went down the voluntary extracurricular route for my mentoring program. When we did it as the maths module, it was mandatory. So if you got above the certain score, you were mandated to be a mentor. And that had mixed reviews, particularly by people who, whilst they got a really good score and could clearly do the maths, they didn't feel that they were very confident in helping others to do it. Whereas in the module, the really big module that was much more about skills development for forensic and investigators and police officers, they felt much more comfortable with the practical skills and the tasks that they were being asked to support and input into. And so having it as being extracurricular, there was about 10% of all the whole cohort that tended to just naturally volunteer every single year. During the pandemic, this did go to only sort of 3 or 4 mentors, but actually because it was such a new experience, I think that was partly the reason, but also that was good because it made it more manageable for me to work with a much smaller group of mentors with this whole new testing of platforms, etc. And absolutely, the great thing as well is that you can start off being quite informal. You can start off just initiating a scheme, and then you can either develop it or change it based on your experiences as well. So that's very much, you know, the scheme that I set out, I said to everybody, you know, you can volunteer for all the workshops, all the repeats that we do, and typically students did volunteer for lots of repeats, but didn't necessarily do all the workshops. But some of the workshops were probably less involved than others. So over the years, I reduced the number of the workshops that I suggested to the mentors that they might wanted to spend their time on. And this, I think, really helped to make sure that they were sustained, that they stayed on board throughout the semester. And we, you know, tried to timetable the sessions so that it didn't clash with some of their other modules in their other years as well. Great. Fab. So my next question, and this is where if you want to turn on your microphones in particular, and we can definitely turn this more into a discussion than you typing away. are there any sort of worries, barriers, challenges, etc.? Other than maybe the things that you've written down or that I've already commented on, that may sort of prevent you or worry you in implementing such a scheme? Yeah, go ahead, Ian. Fantastic.
Hi, Rachel. Thank you. I haven't fully read your paper yet. I've skimmed it, and it's fantastic. So well done. I guess this is a general question, but also a concern with any kind of scheme like this is how do we make sure it reaches everybody? You know, I think any activity that you badge as co-curricular or extracurricular tends to focus on those students who need it the least. That's a massive generalisation, so you understand that. But also, when we consider aspects like the attainment gap, you know, whether that's based on race or disability or gender, there's key challenges for certain groups. And obviously mentorship brings in a dynamic to that. So I guess that's a question about how did you try and reach everybody on your scheme, but also a broader concern about such schemes and how they work.
No, really great question, Ian. And so my first approach for recruitment was to send out the same announcement to basically all of the students who were eligible to basically anybody who had done the module in a previous year. And then the second approach that I took was if there were students who or any of my colleagues knew wanted to be teachers, for example, or to go into roles where, you know, communicating with others by explaining things. So, for example, the level sixes, the third year students, you know, we did approach particular groups of individuals and see if they would be enticed by, you know, some of the like particular benefits we felt would be good for them, or that they would be really great to, you know, take on board. But actually, what I found with just the blanket announcement to everybody was that it was a really nice mix of people. And actually, there were probably equal numbers of students who were really quiet, who actually put themselves forward to do this opportunity as sort of quite outgoing, or, you know, the students or the individuals in the group who you thought might put themselves forward because they might have the confidence to. But there were also potentially some students who were excessively vocal, excessively confident in their knowledge, who actually felt that they benefited from mentoring by actually toning down a little bit some of their eagerness, some of their I don't want to say arrogance in their knowledge, but the fact that you know, actually to realize that the other students may know more about certain things, that they actually learned a lot from their peers, but also the first year students, the mentees that they were actually working with as well. So that was really quite interesting. In terms of different sort of whether it's biological sex, gender, race, ethnicity, etc., and other protected characteristics, our cohorts aren't that diverse, and so trying to get a balance of all of those who may feel like they could or I would want to engage is actually quite hard to do without potentially making people feel like you're picking them out or you're targeting them in a negative way. And so the approaches I tried to use were I tried to be as inclusive with everybody as I could be, and we used our personal tutoring or our professional development sessions to have conversations with our students one-to-one to kind of advertise this as an opportunity to enhance their skills. So it wasn't then targeted, because we did it with all the students, but we did it in a one-to-one manner so that we could tailor those conversations around getting them to or encouraging them to apply and to get involved with the scheme, no matter how much or little they were able to. So if it was just one session in the whole semester, whether it was just one session every week, you know, whatever, I wanted to try and be as flexible and as inclusive with people's external commitments as well as possible. So did that help and answer your question, Ian?
I don't think it's a question you can answer, Rachel. Not anything you personally. It's just such a big issue. But I mean, it's good to see effort in it. I mean, in fact, as a precursor to our final session next Forensic CSI this season, next month, we're going to be talking about decolonising the forensic curriculum a little, which does tap into some of the kind of broader issues you mentioned there. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely. So David, you asked about whether this mentoring opportunity was alongside or instead of personal tutoring. It was as well as. So we have personal tutoring between an academic member of staff and each student. So we have groups of personal tutees that we have at each level, at undergraduate level. And so this mentoring opportunity was for the mentors themselves to mentor others rather than the staff mentoring them. So yeah, it was definitely in addition to. And it, you know, that one of the great things that I really felt was a bonus that I didn't necessarily foresee was that the students who volunteered, particularly in subsequent years, so they didn't just volunteer for 1 year, but they stayed on in their next level of their degree, and they volunteered and they mentored again, felt comfortable with then actually leading on some of the sessions, you know. And again, that actually, so rather than me running the session, actually, you know, we had some support sessions beforehand. I was there in the room, but the actual mentor took the lead for the workshop, which was never the intention, but I made it very open to those possibilities. And if there were things or skills or activities that the mentors really wanted to challenge themselves, or they wanted the opportunity to do or develop, I said, let me know, tell me, and we'll see if we can create that opportunity for you. And that was absolutely one of the ones that they did. Do you think then that your colleagues within your organisations would help you and support you to set one up? Because I fully appreciate that whilst I set this one up myself, I did sometimes find it hard to get other colleagues on board to implement it in their modules. It did end up coming back to me to kind of lead, to manage, to instigate, to recruit volunteers or assign volunteers to them. So would your colleagues, do you think, support you and share some of the load or the burden?
Hi, Rachel. I didn't know whether I could come in on this one. I think, yeah, definitely my colleagues would at DMU. But one of the concerns, I was going to type it in the chat, but it's actually a question for you. It was, I definitely think our colleagues would support the scheme. It was, how did you or have you encountered the situation where mentees might have been a bit disappointed, especially where there might have been engagement to start with from a mentor and then it phased out as their commitments and their workload increased? It was just how would you or how did you manage that sort of situation?
Yeah, definitely. If there were particular, so there were like timetable clashes or something like that, and there weren't enough mentors in a particular session, I just got you know, more involved with actually doing, you know, going through with students and acting as a mentor as well as leading the session. In terms of sort of a mentor's engagement with the mentees, actually I tended to find that because of the numbers, it was quite easy to spot, and the relationship that I built with the mentors, I found it easier to try to address those issues. So depending on the individual, sometimes you could do it sort of one-to-one, a bit privately. Other times, you know, depending on their personality and who they were, you could actually sort of jokingly sort of highlight things, and then, you know, that kind of, you know, maybe if they were really tired or a little bit seemingly hungover or something like that, they could, you know, they'd realize that, you know, that we'd noticed, and then they kind of changed their approach. With the students, the mentors that were really quite shy, I just tried to, you know, keep an ear out a little bit more, and try and sort of get them to prompt with questions, or ask the mentor to say what the mentees had already said to them, to get them try and build those relationships between the mentor and the mentees on the table a little bit more, and then hopefully that started to instigate some further discussion generally as well.
And can I ask you, did the mentors stay with the same group of mentees, or did it vary depending on the session?
It absolutely varied on the session. So some of the mentors came to all the same sessions as the mentees every week, and some of them chose to stay with the same group of students, but sometimes the actual mentees themselves changed and they sat on different tables. So actually they tended to have much more the mentees had experiences from different mentors across the module, rather than just being stuck with one mentor.
Well, that's excellent. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions or thoughts?
What's next, Rachel? I mean, I'm just to throw through, have you been mentored by a student yourself? I've seen that De Montfort in the bioscience area have student module leaders, co-module leaders, where the student effectively mentors the academic on the student need and the student voice. So that's one idea, but what's next?
Yeah, no, that's a great idea and a great insight. I mean, to be honest, I've definitely had informal mentoring from students. I would definitely say that you know, the conversations and the discussions that I have with the mentors over the years have really helped to change, not to change, but to inform my view around, for our particular cohort of students, what they might need, what they want, what the, you know, the feedback, etc. In terms of for the future, I'm not sure. The module that I have been doing this mentoring program on stopped last year, and we've got a brand new module that I'm leader for now that covers criminology, policing, forensic investigation, and forensic science, and it's all about case studies and sort of qualitative research, and getting students to investigate a case study as well. And so my next challenge really, I think, is how do I now implement this mentoring scheme within that new module? I've run it just this year to see how it went, how it goes. And so I am considering whether to, and I'm hoping to start the mentor recruitment in this new module. But with all of our modules changing, and we've revamped our course, I feel like for some of my other colleagues in particular, trying to do this whilst writing all the new material, etc., might be a little bit much. But what I'm hoping to do is do a lot more co-production, co-creation, and a lot more involvement of the students in my new level 5 firearm investigations option module. So there's about 40 students on that this time. It starts in September. So they're going to be much more involved with the decision making. So maybe rather than mentoring this in the first instance, actually seeing how involved and how empowered the students can be and how creative they can be to produce some of their assessment is actually about producing courtroom aids that help them to communicate to the jury and the courtroom, and then seeing if I can implement mentoring within that particular module as well. But I fear that the workload at the moment may not enable some of my colleagues to get on board and to embark on this as much as I'm sure they want to. Oh, Lisa, you're on mute.
Classic. I've got a couple of questions. One of them being that you've mentioned about rewriting your course material. One of them was, have you considered using this model on different courses away from your faculty? So different subject areas at your university?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm not 100% sure whether any of them actually have taken it on board, but the mentoring approach was definitely utilised to help inform the university mentoring schemes that were set up. So particularly helping students to transition into the university. So some of them were the mentors were paired with subject specific ones. Other years they were from any subject, and they were just to help them transition into the learning environment, the university and the geographic local area. So the mentoring scheme, it, you know, and my experiences it have fed into the wider sort of framework that's been adopted across the university, which is great.
I think now you will inspire people with the paper that you might see these types of schemes appearing at other universities. But one of my other questions was, how do you think, because usually in training and practice, it's quite a formalised process with trying to establish people into the casework environment, shall we say, or the crime scene environment. So how do you think that this could translate to practice and the training environment?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I mean, that's what I think I love so much about the informal nature of the scheme, is that actually you don't have to know the answers. You don't have to have done the specific tasks. Sometimes it's just having somebody else to give you a different perspective, to be able to voice concerns or situations and discuss them with others that actually don't know the people involved, or they don't know all about your subject, actually can give you a perspective that you never thought about, or examples that you can work with and work through, that, you know, more from a coaching side, I think, more than the mentoring side. But that I've definitely had sort of coaching experiences that are from people who are way outside of my subject area and also outside of academia, that have probably helped me more than actually subject specific mentors.
Thank you. Are there any more questions in there? I think you've answered lots of them as we've gone along. It's been so amazing, and I think we'll all definitely invest in reading the paper, and congratulations on the publication and your amazing work and everything you do. Any final questions from anyone in with us
Thanks to
today?
everyone for all of their comments and their sort of engagement. I fully appreciate, though, that time is a fundamental aspect. But if you think it's something that your learners or your employers or your employees may benefit from, have a word with your line manager and see if you can have it as part of your workload allocation. You know, even if they say no, you've asked the question. If they don't know what you're hoping to achieve or what you want to implement, you know, you may be surprised and they may actually really help you in achieving that goal.
Thank you, Rachel. Great talk.